have such sights to show you.
We are Poppin the Scary horror podcast here. I'm your host, Coale, and with me as always, I have my good friend and co-host, Captain Aaron.
Hey!
Hey!
I've been promoted.
Yeah. I know. I just wanted to change it up a little bit, just add a little bit of sea shanty flavor there,
Well, just crunchitize me, I guess.
Crunchitize me, Captain!
Yeah!
Ooh. All right, so how are you feeling tonight, bubby?
I'm feeling good, yeah.
All right, that's good.
By the end of it, I'm going to be feeling like these guys in the Lighthouse do, because we're starting late tonight.
Yes. For those that don't know, usually we start a little bit earlier, but just with our schedules we had going on, this was about the only time we could meet. But I think it's also, I feel like as much as I don't like recording late, I also feel like this is going to be the most beneficial and most thematically helping whenever watching this movie, because currently the weather, it's super rainy and windy outside there.
It's a dark and stormy night.
Yes, and it's super late at night. I mean, it's super late, but by the time we finish the movie, because Aaron and I, we're not party animals staying up too terribly late nowadays.
We're old men.
Yes, old man. Old man. The Old Man and the Sea, that was a book.
That was a book I didn't read.
I think I read it once.
Yeah.
But
it was required for some classes in high school to read it, but I was not in those classes, so I never read it.
I was. And overall, I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
So that's our review of the Old Man in the Sea. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. But getting back to brass tacks, with the Lighthouse, I know you've heard about this film before.
I'm excited
have
to
you?
watch it.
Yeah. Have you heard anything else about it? Any preconceived notions or anything like that?
I've got like little bits and pieces. Some may be accurate, some maybe not. I know there's an albatross. I know there's a very long masturbation scene. And I know it's a weird movie. And I also know it centers on two sailors, Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and they're like lighthouse guards or whatever.
Yeah. You're pretty close. You're in the home field area there specifically. You'll figure out kind of more specifically what their professions are as you get into it. But do you know about Robert Eggers and his other films specifically?
No. What else has Robert Eggers done?
So one of the new ones he's releasing is The Northman, which is releasing in theaters. But he also directed The Witch. If you've heard about that on Netflix.
Not The Lion and The Wardrobe.
No, Aslan, just a witch.
Just one witch.
Just a witch there, yeah.
I feel they could have added a couple more characters.
I know, it's a real witch. You know what I'm saying, Chief? But, yeah, so those are some of his films specifically. But I'm kind of with you, where I had heard some stuff about it specifically. I know that, talking about our friend Randy, he was really, really, really excited and hyped for this film.
Yeah.
Like, he was just like constantly like, oh man, I can't wait to watch The Lighthouse. He was super hyped and everything. And so because like I had that hype around me specifically, I didn't let it get to me too much before watching the movie, but it was hard not to. Whenever people are hyping up, they're like, "Oh, it's supposed to be really good," And it has Robert Pattinson, who is a great actor.
I love Robert Pattinson.
No, me too. I am really glad he's putting a lot of the people that are like, Twilight thing, like pretty much putting them down specifically, because he's shown he can act really, really well, and he's done so many. I mean, he's Batman, basically. He got to be Batman.
The Batman.
The Batman.
The one and only.
Yeah, and then Willem Dafoe, of course, who, always makes it a home run in all of his films specifically. So it's hard not to get excited about the film. But I've seen this movie already once before, and I'm not going to give too much on my overall thoughts into it, but I'm very curious about how this film's going to be the second time through, because as you could probably imagine, this isn't quite a straightforward story per se.
Yeah, I've heard it's a little bit of I don't know of a way to say it that's like more positive, but I hear it's kind of like it like drags you through it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think that's the best way to do it, because like it's hard to explain, but it's not your average story.
Okay.
For sure. But I won't give too much away about it, but I'm definitely happy that we'll get to dive into this film, because I especially want to see your view on it, especially because for me, I'll save my reservations and critiques after we watch the film, see how they've compared to the first time I watched it. But I mean, overall, first time I watched it, it's kind of similar to American Psycho. That's what I'll give as a teaser before getting into my previous thoughts and my newer thoughts here specifically.
I don't like American Psycho.
Yeah. You like American Psycho? Okay.
Cole's putting on a raincoat, guys. I'm worried.
I know.
Getting a hatchet.
American Psycho is a huge analogy for the yuppie class and the way it affected the upper city statesmen. Okay, I'm going to stop, because if we're already loopy and we're not even into this movie, which is an hour and 50 minutes long.
We're going to be super loopy.
Yes, it's going to be super loopy, so hold on to your rain hats and umbrellas, because we're going to be right back after we watch Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse.
House of Lights.
Yeah, it is a house of light. It is so bright in the middle of the night.
Guide
What a
my
fright!
boat. Guide me to shore.
And so we are back with the latest ever recorded episode of Poppin the Scary. I think so,
No,
right?
whenever we recorded the second episode, Hellraiser.
Oh my gosh.
That was like 2 a.m.
Oh my gosh, that was... there's probably a reason I don't remember that then. I just remember hanging out with Vaughn specifically. So, let me retcon that. And now we have just completed, or at least have started, the second latest episode of Poppin the Scary here. So, after looking forward to this film with much anticipation, Aaron, how do you feel coming from it?
How do I feel coming?
Yeah.
To a
As
mermaid
soon as it left my mouth, I was like, "Oh no!"
Oh no!
I've handed him. I gave him an easy ball. He's gonna hit a home run with it.
I feel just like Robert Pattinson did coming. I love that part actually, where he comes in the shed and then he throws the little effigy of the mermaid, and then he's crawling outside and his pants are around his ankle. Therefore, he is kind of like a mermaid because he can't use his legs, and there's a lot of people becoming the roles of other people.
You're diving really deep into this. We're saying you're like getting ready to tear it at it.
Well, and I don't even know how far I should go, because like there's not like you're right. It's not like a traditional plot, so I don't even know if like, because it's just character development, that's really the plot. You know what I mean?
No, I hear ya, and yeah.
So I don't even know if that's spoilery, but like the whole movie is kind of Robert Pattinson becoming William Dafoe's character.
Yeah, and pretty much looking at it on a surface level, what did you think of the film?
Generally, I knew it was gonna be weird, and I knew it was gonna be sort of a drag of a experience, not like a totally drag, but like you kind of get drugged through it, sort of a slow burn psychological horror. I already had that expectation going in, but even being prepared for that, you can never really know what you're getting into. You know what I mean?
No.
And I didn't really know what I was getting into.
Yeah, no. I could definitely tell you, whenever I watched it the first time, neither me nor my wife were prepared for what the Lighthouse was about to serve us
Yeah.
specifically.
That was an experience. I wouldn't say the whole thing was enjoyable. I think there were enjoyable things, but I think it was all really good.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the same way that I feel about this that I felt about The Exorcist, where I didn't necessarily enjoy all The Exorcist,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really good.
I think that stands definitely true. Coming from it the second time,
Mm-hmm.
kind of knowing the ropes on like the big points that we're going to hit and everything,
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like I didn't grab as much as I wanted to from it.
There seems like a lot you could get out of a second, third, fourth viewing. You
Mhm.
know, like I feel like I'm gonna say a lot of things, and then if I watched it a couple more times, I'd be like, "Oh no, actually," you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just interesting because I'm coming from the. I can't even say coming anymore. Just after having experienced the Lighthouse a second time.
Yeah.
I can't say exactly it's the same experience I had watching American Psycho the second time.
Right.
Granted, I did, listen to other people's thoughts on American Psycho, which I believe helped heighten my overall enjoyment of it,
Mhm.
where I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm picking up on that stuff and even more stuff. After I watched The Lighthouse, I did listen to essays, and they were very inconclusive.
Yeah, I feel like there's not. Yeah, I feel like there's not a definite end to this because I didn't come to any conclusions in my head where I'm like, yeah, this is definitely what the movie meant. I feel like it was supposed to be open ended, and I feel like that's probably the best approach when you're approaching any story where you have an unreliable narrator, right? You have Robert Pattinson, who's sort of the main character, and a lot of the plot centralizes on is he's going crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the plot centralizes on that, so you don't even know if anything he's experiencing is something he's actually experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you can't really come to complete conclusions because you don't have a reliable source for your information.
No, for sure. And I feel like that's where, like, kind of mentioning the plot overall is also going to help better cement stuff. Because, again, this is probably going to be one of the most complicated films to talk about.
It's a very artsy film. It's very heavy. Yeah.
Yeah, because really, whenever it comes to the plot, it's fairly simple. It just focuses on two wikis played by Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, as we mentioned before, going to a lighthouse, and they're supposed to do maintenance on the lighthouse and basically stay on this island for about 4 weeks. And then once the 4 weeks are up, they'll get to leave the island, get paid, and then wait till it's their turn again. Exactly.
Right.
And so you're pretty much, you feel like you're there for 4 weeks without like having like the calendar being like day 1, day 2, kind of like how The Shining has like Monday, Tuesday, but you do feel like you've been with them for 4 weeks, both in their attitudes and everything specifically. So
the caveat I put to that is that time is also like a sense of conflict in the whole movie. So have you been there for 4 weeks? Were you there for 1 week? Were you there for 7 months? Who knows?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like towards the beginning of the movie, it has just that plot narrative, but as you continue on, the best way I can describe how the plot progressed is, like those trains you take going down to like a cave, like if you've ever been to Branson, Missouri, and you visit those caves and you're on that railroad. It's like you're on that and you're like, okay, here we go, we're going down, and it just keeps going down and it keeps getting darker, and then you just start to question everything.
Right.
Like, it's like if you were in a situation like that, that's kind of how it feels like to be in this film.
Yeah. I think I've decided how I'm going to approach spoilers. Everything that happened plot-wise in the last like 30 minutes is off limits, but everything else I'm just going to talk about because I don't know how I talk about this movie without like mentioning the descent into madness, because that's the whole point of the movie.
Yeah, I think whenever it comes to spoilers, the non-spoilers is probably going to be like an 8. I
Right.
feel like
Right. I don't know
of
how
it.
I don't know how we talk about it without
Yeah, so we'll
But
just
we can talk
yeah.
about character. We can talk about the
When
general plot. And
yeah, we could talk about the characters. I feel like because really we've already mentioned the plot there, and we don't want to give away anything else about it.
Right.
So yeah, I think definitely jumping to the characters. You've mentioned them quite a lot, so let's talk about Robert Pattinson's character,
Yeah.
Winslow specifically. I think he does a great job to where, there's not a lot of actors that are super transformative specifically. But with Robert Pattinson, even though I knew it was Robert Pattinson,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was Robert Pattinson. Like, it was like that perfect thing. Not completely transformative, but enough to where I was buying his character of Winslow specifically.
Versus like Willem Dafoe's always Willem Dafoe, but he's also always great. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
I can't look at his character and be like, "That's not Willem Dafoe," because it's like, yeah, that's Willem Dafoe. But also, like, I love him.
Yeah, and it'll definitely be interesting to dissect his character. But
Robert Pattinson, you definitely get, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's so interesting the way he starts off the movie, just very quiet, reserved, and you're not getting any sort of development from him.
Right.
He's kind of going through the motions because this is his first time being a wiki, as opposed to Willem Dafoe's character, Thomas, as you figure out later, his name is. He's like a professional, been doing this a long, long time,
Right.
specifically. So you're kind of like going through the motions with Robert Pattinson. So he's kind of like basically your guide to see how the world of being a wiki is specifically on
Thomas
this island.
Wick is his name. Clever wiki name. It's a real Crintus the Dentist kind of situation.
But it's so hard to mention with Robert Pattinson's character again without getting too spoilery.
Right.
But as is, I feel like he's a good blank slate, a good contrast to have, because whenever you jump over to Thomas, played by Willem Dafoe, he is completely deranged, like pretty much like the crazy old man mentality from the get-go. And
he's like a slave driver.
And while I can agree that between Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe is kind of more recognizable, just be like, oh yeah, he's being Willem Dafoe. There was some moments in this performance where I just completely lost track of everything, and I'm just buying this insane wiki.
I bought it all the time. Yeah, I bought it the whole time. Yeah, he just has such a face that you can't. Like,
oh, that's true.
Not be like that's Willem Dafoe, but like, yeah, he's always excellent in his characters.
But I feel like again, he's the perfect foil to Robert Pattinson because Robert Pattinson first enters the island and he's quiet, reserved, just trying his best. Just
to do his work.
Yeah, just wants to do his job there. And meanwhile, Willem Dafoe, he doesn't take his job too seriously, but then he's even 10 times harder on Winslow whenever it comes to the overall work he expects him to accomplish. And not only that, but they do opposite shifts of each other, where Willem Dafoe has made it extremely clear that he takes the night shift and that Robert Pattinson will take the day shift specifically.
Right.
And so that's
and they're supposed to alternate, apparently, according to the manual or whatever, but Willem's like, no, I'm in the lighthouse, and you do all the chores.
Yeah, and so it's already just like a pretty much lopsided relationship. Like, you can't see them being like friends real quick, like, because they don't really ever start being amicable per se. Like, Willem Dafoe is pretty much like a, hard ass basically on Robert Pattinson. But at the same point, whenever it comes to them experiencing dinner, he lights up. He's like, hey, lighten up, know.
Have a drink.
Yeah, so it's like a constant wave motion of back and forth with it.
Yeah.
So
Willem Dafoe's character really is gatekeep, gaslight, girl boss.
That is so true, and I never would have put that together myself. Oh my gosh.
He gaslights Robert Pattinson constantly. And then he keeps him from being in the lighthouse. He's a gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also the girl boss of the island.
No, and the other thing, too, is the fact that he is very superstitious.
Yeah.
As compared to Robert Pattinson, who's more of a realist, like, I don't believe in that.
And there's some, pretty big tension caused between the two characters right at the get-go, because Robert Pattinson, runs into a seagull and is like, get the fuck out of the way, seagull, And then, so Willem Dafoe sees this, and later at dinner is like, I saw you smacking with that seagull. You keep away. It's bad luck to kill a seabird. Robert Pattinson's like, superstition. And then Willem Dafoe just, smacks the shit out of him.
It was
He's
crazy.
like, don't you ever kill a goal.
Yeah, it's so hard to describe the relationship because it's a toxic relationship,
Yeah.
but clearly they also feel like they needed to keep their sanity, because...
You're spending, 4 weeks with this person. You gotta be,
Yeah, close quarters, and, obviously it's, probably cold outside constantly, the weather just doesn't look that great, just hanging outside, so you're in close quarters with this dude, and they're even sleeping in the same room together, and the one thing that threw me off so bad about this film, about Willem Dafoe, is his farting.
All the farts. Before you even hear any dialogue in this movie, there's farts.
It is so strange to, have that happen, because you feel like fart jokes really haven't happened since the early 2000s, where a lot of comedies.
And if you, described the general tone and mood and themes of this movie to someone, they probably would never imagine in there the volume of farts that there is in this movie. There just wouldn't be room for that in someone's normal imagining of it.
But whenever it comes to the characters, though, I thought they were very well-written characters for what you see specifically. I never felt like there was zero depth to their characters specifically. Because even though Robert Pattinson doesn't say a lot, you do feel like he's kind of holding his cards to his chest specifically. Just really nope, don't want to talk about myself, just want to get this job done. So there's definitely a lot of depth to both of the characters. And again, we'll definitely be able to dive into it more so once we get to the spoiler stuff. Because again, it's that weird thing where this is so complicated that there's not a lot to talk about without spoiling major stuff.
Right.
Specifically, but we could keep talking about other aspects that people have probably seen even in trailers specifically, but
First of all, if you didn't know, just in case you have never seen anything about the Lighthouse, it's all black and white, and it's shot in 4:3.
Yeah. So that was one of the things I didn't even know about. I knew it was in black and white, but I didn't know it was in 4:3. So once I watched it, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's also very 1800s language throughout. It's a period piece. Yeah. It's old sailors being ye lassie, dooga dooga dooga, or whatever, the whole time. And so you kind of have to, be paying attention, because you can't just, let the dialogue wash over you and you understand it. You have to, do a little bit of translating. It's like you're reading a Herman Melville book. It's like you're reading fucking Moby Dick. You're like, okay.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely has, that old language there, because that's a weird thing about it also, is the fact that they use a lot more archaic language, which, I mean, it isn't pure Shakespeare where you're okay, I'm completely lost, but it is Captain Ahab sort of.
Yeah, and they do make references to Captain Ahab. Yeah, they make a few Melville references. Yeah,
and not only that, but they're murmuring so much of the time, and just the storm specifically, which I always like to enjoy films without subtitles there if they're speaking in English.
Right.
I only use it obviously if I can't, understand the language they're speaking. So because I really just like seeing the full picture and everything else. But because of that, it does make it hard, which I feel like it's kind of intentional typically with higher budget films where you can't understand them, because again, there's just a lot of murmuring between the two of them, and they trade off on who does what. So again, with that archaic language and murmur, it just creates it adds more to the uneasiness of the film, which I probably would say with this film, it's probably one of the most haunting films in a sense. Like it's not
Yeah.
it's not
It does a lot to sort of foster that sense of unease.
mm-hmm, like obviously I can't talk about too much of it,
Mm-hmm.
but watching it a second time round, I honestly got a little more unnerved, and I'm not sure if it's because, again, just of the weather outside and it being super dark out, as opposed to whenever my wife and I watched it, it was like, I think it was in the middle of the afternoon, but we turned the lights off, so it's a little dim. But it was definitely an uneasy film. And again, because it's in that 4:3 black and white thing, it just makes the film feel even older, specifically. Like you're watching a film from the earlier 1900s, specifically. But with that being said, I feel like having that specific cinematography choice, just doing a 4:3 and black and white, I think it honestly paid off.
Yeah.
Because I feel like having that 4:3 helps make the film feel claustrophobic as well, and just pinpoints on stuff specifically even more.
Right. Yeah, this definitely felt like I was like, there are very few books for me that feel like I'm reading, if that makes sense. Like like that feel like literature to me. And this felt like I was reading some dusty old sailor book in the middle of a stormy night.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I would totally agree with that there. I think that's a good way to describe this film, is exactly that. And so watching it the second time round, I didn't try to focus on too much of the plot following through, because without getting spoilery, it's a hard plot to follow per se, because you got the gist, but you're just like, okay, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
And so because of that, because I knew kind of where the beats were specifically, it allowed me to take all of that stuff in, and it definitely does feel like, it doesn't feel too much like you're watching a movie, even though you are. So I think you took the words right out of my head specifically. Not that I could muster those words exactly, but not only that, but one of the other cinematography stuff that happens is there's some really well done shots, whether it's just the position of the camera or the lighting. Good golly gosh. And obviously you probably have seen some screenshots on Twitter and stuff like that, highlighting like really good shots from the Lighthouse specifically. One is whenever Willem Dafoe is getting upset at Robert Pattinson about dinner. That one, the one where he talks about Neptune. Yeah, that one specifically.
Yeah, and he's got, the way they shaded that too just makes him look like he just looks evil. But there's nothing, there's no makeup, there's no special effects, there's nothing like that. It's just the way it's lit. It just looks like a demon.
Exactly. And I love that shot. That's like one of my favorite shots in the film there. It's just, and so there's like a lot to look at. And in all honesty, some of the pictures, because of how archaic the lighthouse and the building looks, it makes me feel, especially with the 4:3 black and white, that I'm looking at an old photograph, like in like a restaurant. Like, you ever been to like one of those like older restaurants where it shows like the lighthouse picture there, and you look at it, you're like, oh, how quaint.
Right, like you're looking at the a bag of Cape Cod chips.
Yes.
Salt and vinegar. Hey, I recently met the guy that sells all of those in our city.
Really?
Apparently, it's county by county that you need to sell them wholesale, and I know the guy that sells them all in our county.
Dude, you got the hookups, man.
Yeah, he's trying to buy one of the counties over. I can't dox us, but I'll tell you after the podcast, I guess. But that guy won't sell it. It's a whole thing.
Dang. Well,
apparently it makes you filthy fucking rich too.
Dang.
Yeah, I know the Cape Cod chips guy in town.
Well, dude, you got the mad connections, bro.
Connections.
I am quite envious of your connections. You're gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna be that guy who's like, hey man, you think you could hook me up with some salt and vinegar chips?
I mean, I'm sure you just buy them from the store. But if you wanted to buy them in bulk, I know the wholesaler.
Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. Have rations.
Yeah.
Another thing about this film, I suppose we should talk about, is the music. The music is very selective, but when it's there, it just adds more to the atmosphere
The
of
sound
it.
engineering in general in this movie, I mean, comes in like waves, and I think that's very intentional. You know, where it's, you know, they have your quiet moments, and then there are some moments of the film that are just, you know, it's got the foghorn on full blast, and they got the music on full volume, and it's just intense, and then another wave comes, and, you know, it dies down a bit, and it goes up again, it dies down a bit, you know.
No, it's such good music, and it especially hit me now because I have like this new sound bar specifically installed, because previously we listened to it with our old sound bar, so listening to it now, just that DTS sound coming through, it just was sincerely. Oh, speaking of sounds there. Yeah, it sounds like that, if you could hear that.
Thunder rumbling outside.
But it definitely added to the overall feeling of the movie. So that was definitely something I highly approved of. And I know we're kind of running out of like non-spoiler cards to talk about, but I think one thing we probably should tell the audience about is the fact that this film, whenever it comes to recommendations, it's not a normal film.
Yeah, it's not one that I would just like mention on a first date.
Yes.
Unless you're dating a really artsy fella or lady, you know what I mean? A really artsy person that like is wearing a mustard yellow top and some mom jeans or something. Then maybe you tell them about the Lighthouse. You might get some points. If they have a shaved head or something, then you might get some points.
Yeah, it's so weird whenever it comes to it specifically, because I never once expected this film to have what it have, and especially nor did my wife, who is definitely not as into the artsy films as I am, which again, I'm not even that much into it either, but she's like a step down below from where I'm at. So whenever it came to be like, oh man, I love Robert Pattinson, I can't wait to see this film, she was like, what the hell was this?
This ain't Twilight.
Yes, yeah.
It's not a blockbuster by any means. It's definitely an art house kind of feel. And if you've never dived into the world of art house, give it a little dabble so you would understand what kind of film this is like. Because it's not built for entertainment even, I would say, in the traditional sense. You know, like Marvel movies are engineered for every moment you're watching to be an entertaining one.
Yes.
This is not that.
No.
This is engineered for every moment to be an artistic one.
No.
And there's an important distinction there. But.
No, I definitely would agree. And before even mentioning our ratings and overall recommendations, Aaron, was there any other non-spoilery talk that you could mention? Because all I'm thinking of is just spoilers, just pouring, just... Yeah,
I mean, what I think this movie has strengths in, and what I'm probably going to gush over is just like themes and character development. And it'd be difficult to talk about those two things without getting into some territory that people might be upset got spoiled for them. So just watch it instead if what we've said so far interests you.
Yeah, I feel like we've given a vague enough description, but basically, if you're wanting to watch a film that is way different than most modern films, specifically, especially in the horror genre, because even though I wouldn't say it's like, oh, so frightening and stuff, really watching this film, I don't know if it's because I was just tired or the mood outside really got to me, but I was very unnerved watching this whole film.
This whole movie is like a personified dark and stormy night. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're scared of storms and stuff, then this would be a scary movie. Not because there's a big bad storm trying to kill everyone and that's the killer or something, but it's just like, it's a scary setting. It's an atmospheric horror in a sense.
No, because I definitely would classify it as horror, even though really, whenever you watch the first half of it, it's not really in the midst of it yet. I said, you're on a constant descent into this. So that's pretty much my thoughts whenever it comes to recommending it overall. And so before we just tear right through spoilers, because like I said, we're really just going to be yeah, I feel like just nailing them all down. Aaron, what would you rate the Lighthouse?
Well, I'm going to emphasize again my point that it's not necessarily, start to finish, we weren't just eyeballs glued to television, you know what I mean? Like, edgy seat, constantly entertained. But if I'm trying to give it if I watched every movie and then some alien, more intelligent civilization came and said, give me accurate ratings of these movies that we might judge their artistic merit, I would give this movie 8.5.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah. It's definitely up there. I flirted with the idea of a 9. I don't think it was trying to be the world's best movie. You know what I mean? But it was a very good one. It was very artistic, and it was trying to convey a feeling. And it was trying to flirt with a couple ideas psychologically. And I feel like in both of those ways, it excelled. The ways I feel like it didn't excel was that it sort of took a cop-out that a lot of artistic films do, in the sense that, like, you don't have to write a good plot if the plot doesn't make any sense at all.
Yes. Yeah.
But that being said, it's not like it's a nonsensical movie. There's sense to be made out of it. It's very, very difficult to create coherency in any sort of movie that involves a narrator that's going crazy. But I feel like overall, I feel like what it did well, it did extremely well. It's kind of like, I can't remember which movie it was, if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where I was talking about, like, the parts it did well are like 10 out of 10s, you know what I mean? And
yeah, I think it was The Ring, right?
Yeah. And then there are a couple like parts where it's like, right, this pacing was really boring, but also they probably knew that, you know what I mean? That's supposed to feel like a drag, like you're also on this island being a wiki, Yeah, so it's not a grab the popcorn kind of flick.
Yeah.
I feel like we've said that for a few movies. It's not a popcorn kind of flick where you're gonna kick up and enjoy an icy in the theater and come out of this and be like, who is your favorite Marvel superhero? You're gonna come out of it and being like, who? But it's gonna be like walking through a museum where you see a disturbing piece of art or something, and then you're thinking about it for weeks. It leaves an impression, and that impression for me is very much on the higher end. Not perfect, but up there. So like 8.5.
Man, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, because I know you had some pretty critical points there and stuff, at least for non-spoilery stuff. Again, I'm sure a lot more praise will come once you're able to really dive into themes and narratives and stuff. But I think the museum analogy, again, I'm happy to have you on this podcast because I feel like you have the perfect way of describing films in a scenario. I think it's definitely accurate to his museum analogy, like going through, seeing different pieces, and then finding like a couple of pieces that's going to bother the heck out of you. Because there's been instances like that where I'll see something and I'm like, man, I just need to get that out of my head. Just disturbs me. But with my rating specifically, I could probably tell you like what I rated it the first time I watched through, and then the second time, because the first time I'm watching through, I'm really looking at the plot, like, okay, where's the story going? Where is everything happening? Where is that? And doing that kind of led me to overall give the movie, the first time I watched it, just a lowly 5 out of 10, specifically because I'm like, okay, well, I mean, performances were good and, it looked pretty, but I basically was not expecting what I got. And I also started on a hyped out level, like, oh man, this is going to be crazy. This is going to be insane. Yeah. And it was, but not in the way I was expecting it to. Right. So with that, that's what it was the first time through. This time, however, knowing like, okay, I'm not really going to focus on the plot, but instead pick up the other pieces that are lying around. And because of that, I had a heightened sense of enjoyment there. And again, it's not like Aaron and I were like cracking up on a couch or anything. Really, we didn't talk at all. It was just dead silence between the two of us sitting there with our blueberry sea dog beer. And just watching it. And I was able just to, again, I think even the night might have even helped raise the score up a bit, just because even though I wasn't like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? I just felt like I was in the film and I was just along for the ride, just experiencing everything. It just felt more like an experience than it did like watching a film for entertainment. And because of that, but also, not ignoring the fact that there's definitely a lot of still questions I have after watching it the second time. I'm going to give it a very, very, very soft 7. I could realistically do like 6.5, but I feel like, again, just that artistic value, just the fact that there's so many scenes where I'm like, man, that was just done so good. I think it just like nudges it up barely to a 7 there.
Nice.
So yeah, that's both of our ratings for The Lighthouse. Again, sorry we can't give too much details and everything else. Again, there's just so much to talk about. And so
it's definitely one of those movies where whenever you exit the theater, even though you wouldn't be talking about what your favorite kaboomy car explosion moment was, you would be like, what the fuck did this mean? What do you think? It's one of those, and so I'm excited to get into that with Coale. But.
Yeah, so this is your chance to get out of spoilers and stuff, but tell me how you feel about Robert Pattinson jacking off.
Well, okay, so that was a common theme, right? Whenever he got to the island, was the sort of lust or whatever, and both of them are sort of overcome by lust. So whenever Robert Pattinson first arrives, he's like straight man holding the cards close to the chest kind of thing. And one of the first things he notices is, like, whenever he's patching the roof, is like... one of the first things he notices is the booby statue of the siren or whatever. When he unrolls his bed. And then he notices, like, a few moments of Willem Dafoe, like, writhing both in his bed and then, like, later in the lighthouse when there's all this goo and, like, questionable goo. I totally thought he was just coming through the vents until I saw the tentacle or whatever. But, like, that was a lot, because, like, he was definitely, like... experiencing sexual pleasure. And then,
for sure.
And then obviously there's several moments of like dreams or hallucinations of the siren, in a very sexual way, because that's what sirens do, is they sexually attract you and then they drown you, and so that was sort of a theme, and it was like a danger, like, and it came from multiple places. Like the lighthouse itself, the lantern was a source of like incredible desire, and it was both sexual and like madness desire, you know what I mean? And it had that same kind of energy that the siren did for Robert. But like Willem was always there, and then Robert eventually got to the lantern part where he was always curious about it, but then that became the focus of his weird sexual and madness induced rage.
No, it's crazy to see, like, just, again, almost the tables turn, because, like you mentioned kind of previously a little bit, with Robert Pattinson, he starts off as a straight man, and then with Willem Dafoe, he's the more crazed one.
Right.
But it's like the dynamic changes, and Willem Dafoe doesn't necessarily become the straight man, but he becomes more of a straight man than what Robert Pattinson is, who is clearly becoming unhinged towards the end of the film.
Here's my thing. Here's the thing that I'm stuck on. There's like a few explanations for how the plot goes, like in my mind, but the one that seems to be focused on the most to me is that Willem Dafoe is part of Robert Pattinson. He's either part of his imagination, like he says in that one scene where he's like, you're actually, knee deep getting frostbite and snow in Canada, running away from this logging camp. There is no island. I'm a projection of you. It could be that, or it could be, maybe he had to be a wiki by himself and he just imagined this Willem Dafoe character, because Willem Dafoe's character, they specifically start the movie so that Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are like really different. So you think, and then the similarities get stacked up over and over and over the course of the film, to the point where, like, they have the same name. They're both Tommy. You know what I mean? They're both Tom, Thomas, Tom, whatever.
Yeah.
And they find that out about each other later. And really, like, Robert Pattinson becomes unhinged when he starts drinking, and he's convinced to drink by, like, this Willem Dafoe. That's probably just the little voice in his head that's like, drink, do your work, you're lazy, you're a dog, you're all these things. It's like his self-critical voice, and he dives into madness. Like, that's that's like the main thing that seems to me the movie's pushing us towards. But there's several explanations.
Well, and that's a crazy thing too, because whenever I watched it the first time, looking at the plot line, I'm taking it like straight at face value. Right. And if you do that exactly, you're just going to get more muddied, because you do it straightforward.
And you have an unreliable narrator.
Well, yeah, for sure. And that was the crazy thing too, because I actually listened to like a lot of videos, and I'm sure there's probably more video essays that dive better into it. I just wasn't able to find those videos. So like listening to it, I never got the answers I truly wanted, but I figured out lots of inspirations for the overall story it has. So it's kind of peculiar. One of them is actually based on a real event where in the early 1800s, there's these two wikis that go to an island together, both named Thomas, and they didn't like each other, and they didn't get along. People knew that whenever they got on the island. But I guess the other Thomas had died from something. And so the other Thomas freaked out because he's like, oh no, they're going to think I killed him. And so he takes his body and puts it outside of the house in a coffin specifically. And I guess like there'd be instances where like the wind would move the body and it drove the other Thomas insane, as if he was being haunted. And so whenever they came back to the island, they actually had to institutionalize the other wiki that was alive. So they have that inspiration. And I know there's elements of Edgar Allan Poe in there specifically, which I definitely picked up it.
Even especially the buried alive part. That was the part that I was like, this is Poe as fuck. You know what I mean? Poe was obsessed. He was, I mean, legitimately, Poe was terrified of being buried alive, as were many people in that era, because it happened a lot in that era.
Yeah.
It really did. Because, I mean, you probably heard old stories of like bells being attached to strings in coffins or whatever. And that was real shit in the 1800s, because people would, you know, there were spreads of diseases and stuff in the Americas, and people would fall ill to something or fall into a coma from something, and you would assume they were dead because their heartbeat would be so low or whatever that a doctor would be like, all right, she's dead, toss them in a coffin. And then they would not be dead. They would wake up from their comatose state or whatever, and they would have been buried alive. And they, you know, it used to be people died so often that you would dig up their old spots and put new coffins in there, like straight up, like that would happen. And they would find coffins with claw marks of people trying to get out. It was such a problem, that they had to do this bell on a string thing, and that's what graveyard keepers are there for, was to you know, make sure that the dead are actually dead. Yeah. And so whenever they buried Willem Dafoe there, I was like, he's not actually dead. He's gonna come back.
No, for sure.
I was like, this is Poe as fuck, and he's gonna come back.
Yeah. And the third thing, which I had only picked up towards the very end looking at Robert Pattinson, is that it's actually based on Greek mythology.
Really?
Yeah, it's two instances.
The sirens,
yeah, that's definitely one of the aspects there, but the one I knew about, looking into it, I had to refresh for this episode because I hate giving inaccurate information, was Prometheus. Because Prometheus took fire and brought it to the mortals specifically, and so since Zeus didn't like it, he basically had Prometheus tied to a rock and had his organs pecked out by birds. And so whenever you're talking about the fire in the Lighthouse specifically, that's the fire that Robert Pattinson was desiring and took there. And here's the other thing I didn't know about, but the other influence there was Proteus. There, who I guess was like an old stickler of an old man who knew everything specifically, and pretty much hated sharing knowledge. Like he just kept it all to himself there. I didn't even know that aspect until I had to do deeper research there, because I was like, okay, make sure to get all the details of Prometheus down. But it's definitely, I felt a strong mythological connections, especially because during that speech I mentioned before previously, Willem Dafoe's mentioning, he's like mentioning like, I curse thee with Neptune. And then there's lots of imagery of him as like a sea god almost.
Right, yeah, and your body being bloated with brine and all that kind of shit.
And not only that, but he has like a coral crown there, and becomes,
whenever he's getting the shit beat out of him,
has that stuff, and then the tentacles there specifically. And then there's that one horrifying scene where Robert Pattinson is looking at the body and flips it over and then feels a hand on his back, and it's just naked Willem Dafoe just burning light into Robert Pattinson's face. So I feel like you mentioning specifically that Willem Dafoe isn't actually a real person.
Right.
I never considered that both viewings there, but it's interesting because I feel like there's just too many questions and stuff to where the plot becomes less and less valid because of it. You feel like you can't follow along, which is why the second time I'm watching through, I'm like, I'm not even going to pay attention to the plot because I know.
And that's really not the point of the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not the plot. It's the theme. It's the characters. It's the symbolism, right?
Yeah, so, and because of that, I felt like I got a better enjoyment out of it, which is weird because I love a good story and everything else. And, like both this and I guess the best comparison I could do amongst all the films we've watched is American Psycho, where the plot isn't too necessarily important. However, with American Psycho, I felt like the plot was still like a rail of like, okay, you could go through the motions of the story.
Right.
This one just goes off the rails.
Right.
And you have no idea what anything means.
And there are so many moments where, because the point of view character is Robert Pattinson, right? And he's a liar. That gets established that he is lying about his identity. Turns out he was a murderer and he's fleeing from his past. And that he gets questioned by the only other character there is Willem Dafoe, who is a gaslighter, is essentially.
Yeah.
He says, you're getting picked up tomorrow, and then like, no, you're not actually getting picked up. I didn't say that. And then, there's one moment where he's like, the ship was supposed to come yesterday. He's like, yesterday, that was 5 weeks ago, And it's just like, you never know what the other only other character in there is not giving him anything. And he especially when he finds the book at the end that he's not allowed to read, the logbook or whatever, and he sees all these things of betrayal from his captain that said like, I won't tell him that you're drinking, I won't tell him all these things, and then it's all there in the logbook, and he's you're a liar. And it's hard to trust the plot whenever you have the only other character is a liar, and then the main character is going crazy, and there are time skips, but you don't know how much because he's been drinking, and you don't know what's reality or what's a dream, because as soon as he gets to the island, he starts having these visions, dreams. Is it real? Because at the end, some aspect of it at least turns out to be real, because they're dead. There's the corpse in the lobster trap apparently was real,
Yeah.
He actually killed Willem Dafoe's character, but then even while he was killing Willem Dafoe's character, it turned into 3 other characters. It turned into the siren. It turned into the guy that was dead in the lobster trap. I assume that's who that guy was.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. And then So and then at one point it was him, right? There was two Robert Pattinsons.
Yeah, that was the one like right before naked Willem Dafoe comes up.
Right. Which is one of the stronger points, I think, that Willem Dafoe is Robert Pattinson in some aspect. But
yeah. Because that's the thing I have like a weird time accepting, because obviously you see the both of them go on the island unless he's just imagined it the entire time, because usually they need 2 people to go to the island.
Here's the parallels, right? Let me lay it out for you, right? First off, notice that Willem Dafoe's character conveniently has like a broken leg or whatever, right? And therefore can't do any of the work. So all of the work being done is by Robert Pattinson. The only thing that Willem Dafoe's character does is like cook, but you never even see him cook. You know what I mean? You just see them eat together and drink together and stuff. And he has knowledge, but other than that, he's not doing anything, right? So anything tangible that happens on the island, you can attribute to Robert Pattinson. And even some of the only tangible things you see happen from Willem Dafoe, like whenever he chops up the boat, Willem Dafoe instantly accuses Robert Pattinson of doing it. He's like, "You're crazy, you caught up the lifeboat," or whatever, even though we just saw Rob. Right, so even those actions are attributed back to Robert Pattinson by Willem Dafoe's character. So you could see it being kind of like his consciousness or whatever. So that's number one thing. But then there's parallels in how the characters become one another, right? Like Robert Pattinson in the beginning is like cards close to the chest, sane, normal, not drinking, following the rules. I want to be a good boy. And then Robert Pattinson's sort of like his Willem Dafoe's kind of his like the craziness that's inside, right? You know, all the other aspects, right? Slowly as they progress, like, okay, Robert Pattinson first, he falls from the lighthouse, right? Because Willem Dafoe like breaks, and he hurts his leg, and so he's like hobbling with one leg, just like Willem Dafoe apparently broke his leg or whatever, right? Right?
No. I'm not eye rolling at you. Yeah. I'm doing like a
realization thing,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no. So I just want to make sure.
And then even later, so like Robert Pattinson's legs healed at some point later, he even accuses Willem Dafoe's character of faking the broken leg thing. He's like, "Your leg's not even broken. You weren't a sailor. You weren't this. You weren't that." And of course, the things that he is most upset about Willem Dafoe's character lying about is assuming other identities. You weren't a sailor. You weren't this. And what's he doing but sitting here assuming another identity? Right? So those are all evidence pieces there that point to that for me. On top of all that, right? Shoot, I had 2 points, and the second one entered my brain, and the first one just vanished. So I'll just go to the second one, I guess. So he's really upset about killing goals, right? Don't do it. Goals can't die or whatever. The scene that we see Robert Pattinson kill a goal only happens after he finds a dead goal already, right?
Yeah.
So he opens the latrine or whatever, and inside is a dead goal, and then the seagull with one eye or whatever comes up, and it starts pecking at him, and he gets mad, he kills it, right? What happened before he got to the island, right? Except Willem Dafoe's character killed the other guy, right? Killed the other guy that was on the island. So, and then Willem Dafoe gets so upset about killing goals because they are the souls of other sailors, right? They're human beings in his mind. So that goal that was dead already is just like the dead guy in the lobster trap, right? So here's my grand where I think the plot of this story is. Willem Dafoe's character was created, right? Was imagined. Him coming to the island for this stint or whatever was imagined by Robert Pattinson. But it's because Robert Pattinson character, Willem Dafoe's character, whoever is the real one, you know, who knows, was there before with this second guy and killed him, right? And it's like his guilty conscience, right? So then it's just Robert Pattinson alone on the island afterwards, after this other guy is dead because he went mad apparently, and he's talking to himself. He's already mad at this point, but like it's his split personality. It's like him and Willem Dafoe now. It's like here's the murderer part of me or whatever, and then here's me, and they're getting mad at each other, and he's having these conversations, but he's sort of like dissociated himself, created a fresh start, a new identity. I'm, you know, a different guy from a different place, and I killed somebody, but like the person he killed was the other Wiki or whatever, and the fake personality is Willem Dafoe. His name's Thomas Wick. He's like, you're Thomas because I'm Thomas, and you're a Wick because you're a Wiki. You know what I mean? But his name was Thomas Hardy or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's literally just like a projection of himself, or maybe it's like himself in the future, or whatever the mystery of the island is. But in some aspect, it's him.
Yeah. Wow, that was quite the marathon.
Yeah.
Of syllables there. My brain was trying to catch up, but it just started going.
I've got more I could say
Overheating.
too, but I'll just hold it right there.
No, you're good. I wish I could follow that up with something, but I guess the other thing, because I know you've mentioned it's like all in his head specifically there, but I'm curious if there's like really any other elements that could add to the overall insanity that the lighthouse brings. Whether it's the fact that it is more of a supernatural thing, like killing the gull specifically, because I was confused whenever I watched it, because Robert Pattinson already made it clear that the water on the island tastes like garbage.
Yeah.
It's like not good, whatever. And then after seeing the gull in there basically dirty up the latrine there and killing the other gull, that's whenever he decides, you know what, I'll drink alcohol, sure.
Right.
And so that's where the second element I could be adding to the insanity plays in, because you already have a supernatural element. Then you have the alcohol playing in, and then once they realize the boat isn't coming,
Right.
and they run out of food, what's Willem Dafoe's answer for rations? More alcohol.
Right.
And they get to the point where they're just chugging it, chugging it through the film, and they're even like going to like more crude methods of drinking alcohol,
Were they
like
drinking lantern oil? Is
like
that what
it
that
looked
was?
like it like fuel or
Yeah.
something like that, like gasoline or something.
Yeah.
Just like that, because I saw them like sweeten it with honey there specifically, but they both have a mad descent. Assuming it's two or one person,
Right.
that's a question. Because you have that, so it's like, is it the alcohol? Is it the supernatural? Is it the overall isolation there specifically?
Right.
It's like what happened to Jack Torrance in The Shining times 12
Right.
there specifically, because in The Shining I feel like it was honestly like a combination of all three stuff, and this, it doesn't ever make a clear line on whether this is some supernatural act, of a wrathful god,
Right.
because that's the thing, they keep personifying Willem Dafoe as this god,
Yeah. That's
like
true.
because he's the keeper of fire and stuff. He's like, you can't see it.
He's
and Robert
the only
Pattinson,
one allowed, literally in the highest place. You know what I mean?
yeah, and that was the other thing too, is the fact that Robert Pattinson started seeing the mermaids even before he killed the gulls specifically.
Right.
So that's the weird thing.
the part
It was
that-
like the nightmares.
Yeah, and the part that kind of, I don't know, but confused me, but sticks out to me, is as soon as he gets to the island, right, and he unfurls his mattress, like the first thing he does is notice a little hole in it, and he digs through and he finds this like effigy of a mermaid, right?
Along with the pubic hair or something that's
Some
wadded up.
sort of hair wadded in there, but like what? He like went straight for that, you know what I mean?
Like as if he had.
He knew it was there, but this
Mhm.
is the first time he's supposedly on this island. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's just and it doesn't ever answer it, but it's not in the sense of like, oh, perhaps it means this. It's just like, it's not quite David Lynch level. If you've ever seen a David Lynch film, he goes even way further. Like movies like Mulholland Drive and stuff, they'll tell me like, oh, it's actually supposed to mean this, and I get zero satisfaction out of this. The Lighthouse is like the middleman between American Psycho and The Shining being the top, like, oh man, I just love digging through it. The Lighthouse is like, it has a lot of good stuff, but it also has a lot of stuff of like, I don't know what to think of this. Like finding that effigy of the mermaid there specifically, because the only instance we get is Willem Dafoe's character talking. He's like, oh yeah, the previous wiki went mad talking about mermaids and sirens, talking about that. And then like the relationship between Robert Pattinson and the siren is first out of fear specifically.
Right, he runs from it. Yeah.
Yeah, but then soon he just wants to make love to it specifically.
That's like after the alcohol gets introduced and he starts getting like a little lost in the sauce, you know what I mean?
There. And so that's the thing that with me, it's like, where is this film going and taking this? And in the meanwhile, just to make sure your sanity is deteriorating with this film, there's so many scenes between Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe where they are just losing their minds. Like, it's just incoherent stuff. Specifically, like, just them drinking and screaming and dancing.
One of the scariest parts had the funniest line attached to it. It's after Robert Pattinson announces that he's like a murderer when they're like in a drunken stupor. He's like, my name's Thomas or whatever. And he's like, I'm not Thomas. He's like, you're not Thomas, I'm Thomas. And he's like, no, I'm Thomas. And then does that whole thing. And then like the morning after, he like wakes up and the music gets all weird and the cinematography gets all weird. And it's just a Willem Dafoe voiceover that like sounds like it's booming through the whole island.
Is it the spilled the beans?
You shouldn't have spilled the beans. Why'd you spill the beans?
Thinking about those beans.
And that honestly was like, and it's because I think it's so like weird, you know, it's like unordinary, just the way it's presented and the line.
Yes.
The line that's being used to like create this unease is about spilling beans or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just adds to that just creepy factor.
No, it's so haunting. Like after especially Robert Pattinson kills the Coale and stuff, the haunt factor increases 11-fold. And there's already like some creepy stuff, like the first introduction of the mermaid siren just screaming. There's just something unnerving about
the way they made the sirens, the mermaids or whatever, genuinely was like, I get how it's like seductive and horrifying all at the same time. Like they're monsters and they are monstrous, and I also get how like a lonely sailor would be like, oh, this thing wants to mate with me, and then it's just like, ah!
Yeah.
Just like just this horrifying screech of like, yep, you're gonna die. That's the siren song.
Yeah, that scene was disturbing, and there's definitely a lot more speckled in. I even jump scared whenever Willem Dafoe comes back at Robert Pattinson with the axe. Yeah. Like, I knew what was happening. Yeah. And I didn't get scared the first time because probably my brain was having the worst time processing what
the fuck was happening.
Yes, it's going on. But the other thing that disturbed me the first time and still pretty much disturbed me the second time, just kind of made me laugh a little bit, is as soon as Robert Pattinson gets to the light in the lighthouse there, and you see like the mud blood stuff on his face like disappear, and he just is like becoming elated or going insane.
Was that oil on his face?
I don't know what it was because
he drinks from like an oil canister.
That must be what it is, because his face was clean the scene prior,
right
after he kills Willem Dafoe with the axe there specifically. But it just starts to dissipate more and more, and then he's just screaming louder and louder, but everything's so distorted. And the first time I watched it, it honestly did kind of unnerve me. Second time, it still unnerved me, but it was also made me laugh because it just made me think of someone yelling in a Turtle Beach headset going,
yeah, it was like, I can't think of it. It was like, and it's not bass boot. What's the term for it? It was just like really overmodulated.
It was very distorted.
Yeah, but it was also like faint. Like you could almost, like you heard a few screams before you really like realized that he was screaming. Like it looks like he's screaming, but like it's like there's just so much noise, like even the screams were like faint in a way, even though it was all so loud. Really disturbing. And it was disturbing just to see Robert Pattinson, who's like pretty normal expression throughout most of the movie.
Yes.
And he's just like, mouth agape, just like,
yeah, it's just contorting his face there before just getting himself blasted or fainting backwards down the stairs. Right. And then it ends with his eyes being pecked out and his organs being pulled out by gulls on the beach.
And he's full naked.
Yeah.
Which is just like how Willem Dafoe was whenever he was shooting his light bulb beams at him in the vision or whatever. Just full naked on the beach.
And so because of like all this stuff that goes on, I honestly, like, I would have never come up with like the fact of like, oh, perhaps it's all in his head specifically. There's only one person there. Because even with that information, I don't know if with the pieces that I've gotten the second time through, I could have formed my own hypothesis there specifically, because
That's the one that stands out the most to me. But there's definitely valid points towards like the island is just cursed, and maybe Willem Dafoe is like a figment of the island. You know what I mean? Like he's like a spirit of the island, or a sort of god of this island that comes and punishes those, and that's why he cuts up the boat whenever Robert Pattinson's trying to leave, and that's why he killed the last Wiki, and that's why the boat's not coming back, is because you were shipped there by a more otherworldly fairy. Maybe this is hell. Maybe this, there's all kinds of other explanations you could give that are still otherworldly, but not necessarily just psychosis.
Well, and that's a crazy thing too, because I feel like with every theory that you could present in this film, there's something to be evidence against that theory there, and it's one of those things that I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing for a film to have, because I don't feel like necessarily a film has to have just one answer do that, but it is also another thing where if it has so much going on there, it definitely does kind of just overflood the mind to where I was trying to formulate my own hypothesis on what the film represents and means specifically, and I gotta be honest, it was just overloading my mind specifically there, which I don't think is inherently bad, but it does hinder my enjoyment a bit. It's just kind of like, you hearing like someone talk in a different language and stuff, or like sing in a different language. Like you enjoy the melody, but you don't know if you're able to comprehend too much about it. It's just one of those things where enjoying the film, it's not clear cut, like, it doesn't have more clear cut analysis like American Psycho or The Shining does, or even Donnie Darko for that matter. It's just like a hodgepodge of like so many ideas, which is both a pro and a con, I feel like, for this film there. Because I feel like because of that, it made my enjoyment of the film second time round, once I kind of knew what the ropes were, really enjoyable. Again, I feel like it is like looking at a work of art, specifically like a painting and stuff, where it just evokes so many emotions and so much stuff is thrown into it there specifically. So I feel like that's why whenever it came to talking about this film, there's a whole lot you could talk about, but it basically would be giving away a lot of what makes the Lighthouse such a crazy experience there.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like the art analogy's apt. It's like looking at I can think of a few like disturbing famous paintings like that have context, but like even just with the context is not enough. Like Saturn eating his children,
yes,
or like Guernica, or like these paintings that are disturbing. Even Las Meninas even has just like a weird little sort of like creepy vibe to it, and it's like, you can have I know Saturn eating his children is based on mythology of the god Saturn literally eating his children, because that's how the story goes, but like it doesn't mean looking at the picture that it's not horrifying.
Yes.
And so I feel like that's the point, is of like, okay, I have some context here about why they made the Lighthouse, what they were inspired by, generally the themes that it's telling me, but like the point isn't necessarily one of those aspects or to find a solution, but rather to view this painting as a whole and experience that emotion, and that emotion is the point of like what you take away with it.
Yeah, you definitely made me have a flashback to humanities in college, where they talked about like whether art was for the rich or for the poor people specifically to enjoy, because like rich people could understand like the meaning and stuff behind it specifically, whereas like the poor lower class who didn't have that education and stuff just says like, oh, pretty.
Right, but
there.
They have a blank slate to view it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I feel like this film it's one of those things that it doesn't have a clear-cut answer, and I think that's both a blessing and a curse for me, because there's times where I've gotten like people being like, oh yeah, in this film this represents this and that, and then I still don't appreciate it, and then other times I'm like, whoa, I even appreciate this film even more. This is just a middleman and its own hodgepodge of stuff there. So I feel like with this film, because it's not so straight-laced and straightforward, and people can't just accurately define it. I think it makes it rich for discussion at the very least, whether
Absolutely.
or not, you agree with people's theories or not on it there.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where, like, yeah, you can look at it, and tonight, like, I can draw ties between the dead bird in the latrine and the dead guy in the trap. I can make the ties between Willem Dafoe's lies and Robert Pattinson's lies, and how their characters are similar, and how they sort of become more similar as the movie goes on. But it doesn't reach an end point. And I feel like the movie doesn't really want you to, or it would give you one. You know what I mean? I feel like it intentionally confuses you so that you think about it more, so you discuss it more, whatever the object of that is. Maybe they just didn't want to write an ending, who fucking knows, you know? But so they give you these symbols, and yeah, that's what I feel like I mean by it being like a piece of physical art, like a painting or something, where there's a story in a painting, they say, but obviously there's not a story arc. There's not a first, beginning, and middle, end. It's just you get a general sense of what happened here, and that's sort of what you get out of this like 2-hour movie too. Is like,
Yes,
here's what happened here, but like, do you have all the answers? Do you have all the context? No, that's kind of the point. Is it keeps your mind racing.
No. And I just had a brain blast moment. I'm not sure if it's because it's currently past 1 a.m. I'm pretty tired or whatever. But I think talking with you, I've thought of my own hypothesis, which might be a cop-out, but I feel like this is the way I'm able to understand it. So I believe there's two people on the island, both Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson there. However, I also believe that the island is inherently cursed there specifically, but I feel like whether it's through supernatural or mental disdain there specifically, I'm more likely to believe in supernatural, is the fact that there is something otherworldly that does take the form of what Robert Pattinson hates. And pretty much looking at the first interaction you see between Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, Robert Pattinson is just like, you're pretty much everything I hate.
Yeah.
Specifically from the get-go there. Because, like, if you look at the film, they're supposed to have different ships. Robert Pattinson takes the daytime, Willem Dafoe takes the nighttime there. But then you'll see them randomly together, and it's like broad daylight outside. Right. And so you're like, is this an inconsistent sleep schedule or something? Or what's going on? Not to say that people don't overlap, but what if somehow Robert has manifested the thing he hates being Willem Dafoe's character? Because there's moments where Willem Dafoe is more reserved and calm down, like, hey, calm down. And he's talking about destroying the ship there specifically. But what if it's one of the things, whether it's Robert Pattinson's mind saying you can't leave the island, or the supernatural thing that's destroying the ship there specifically, but is also trying to screw with their mind. Kind of like that sense of like how people's minds start to go crazy being deserted on an island there.
Right, you get like
but I feel like it has to be like a supernatural thing there. Because there's moments where Willem Dafoe will be hanging out with Robert Pattinson, and then before Robert Pattinson knows it, Willem Dafoe's like long gone. Right. Specifically, like Willem Dafoe's teleporting everywhere.
That actually really interesting. Yeah, your brain blast is getting me.
Yeah, because like, what if it's just 3 people? Because again, what if the person that's saying, "Hey, it's okay if you drink. Hey, it's okay if you do this. Hey, it's okay if you do all this stuff here specifically," and then he has a record book written of all the offenses he's done previously there, and he's like, "What's this?" And it's like, I'm just writing down what you've been doing,
right,
and stuff. Because you hear about the backstory of Willem Dafoe's character. He's like, oh yeah, 13 Christmases, right? Talking about it like his married life. So he's been doing this for a long time. So he has to be like a seasoned veteran, not to go crazy afterwards. And with Robert Pattinson having that remorse over killing that person, it's constantly being brought back up and traumatized, and him being lonely, not having anybody, I feel like it's preying on him, almost like how Jack Torrance has the hotel preying on him,
Right.
you know, just to be the one to kind of break the stuff. That's the way I would view it personally. And so there's like moments where, like, you know, if Willem Dafoe like is buried alive, he's just like, okay, I need to kill him. He's going unhinged, specifically. Although I wonder also if the island is also making Willem Dafoe a little crazy as well.
Yeah.
Specifically, that's the crazy thing.
See, so here's the brain blast. Your brain blast, Gabe. Instead of thinking that Robert Pattinson conjured up Willem Dafoe in his entirety, instead, what if Robert Pattinson only imagines Willem Dafoe's character is there sometimes when he's not? You know what I mean? Like, Willem Dafoe's real, Robert Pattinson's real. They're both real, separate people. But like, whenever Robert Pattinson is descending into madness, he's imagining Willem Dafoe there in some situations, and he's imagining they're drinking together and getting chummy together and fighting together or whatever. But really, you know, Willem's in the lighthouse or whatever, doing his duty or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's how he has this sort of omnipresence, and that's how, like, he does, you know, Willem Dafoe will do something, and then Willem Dafoe will come back in another scene and be like, why did you do that? It's because Robert Pattinson was imagining Willem Dafoe did it, but really he did it. You know what I mean? And then Willem Dafoe is not gaslighting him, but just being like, what the fuck did you do?
Because I think that's definitely really valid there, because it might also be like a red herring, because the audience is shown with Willem Dafoe, he's kind of the crazy one between the two there. So of course you would think that he's more of the crazy one than what Robert Pattinson is specifically. So it definitely could be a red herring, because the thing that keeps popping up is, why does Willem Dafoe keep looking like these mythological beings and stuff specifically, if it wasn't the island manifesting an image in Robert's mind, kind of causing him to go crazy. So that's my overall view, because I feel like the film is grounded sometimes and then completely aloof others. Like, definitely just anything goes, everything's insane.
Right.
So I think because you were here and stuff with, instead of my wife who's just like, I have no idea what I just watched specifically, I think that's helped me kind of summarize my own idea about the film, which maybe, who knows, like watching it third or fourth time, because I could definitely see myself watching it again, which is why I gave it like the 7 there, because it's just, there's something so interesting about it, as both aesthetic wise and just feeling wise. Again, it felt like I was in a nightmare the entire time, where stuff doesn't make sense there and it feels erratic and everything. It just felt more like a nightmare going through, even more so than what The Shining did at a lot of points specifically there. So it's definitely a film that I could see myself going back to and just trying to see if I find any other pieces that adds to both of our theories that we've come up whenever it comes to The Lighthouse. But because it is that film, I think it's a really hard sell for people there. It's not a film that I would willy-nilly, again, like you mentioned, show other people. So
it's definitely a film you gotta pay attention to, and it's definitely a film you have to, like, I feel like you have to analyze it to get enjoyment out of it.
But also try not to focus on just one aspect. There, just kind of let the wave wash over you almost. Aside from hearing that stuff and us kind of really just going over the meaning and everything else, is there anything else about this film that we could possibly mention?
I think we've gone off about the stuff that intrigued us the most, for sure.
Because, I mean, again, there's a lot of, like, basic stuff, like we've mentioned. Like, plot-wise, it just has the starting point and then just really doesn't even matter the rest of the film. Like, it has a plot and it goes through motions, but really you're just kind of rolling along with the cursed house thing going on.
I feel like it definitely, you get dropped into a setting and they give you some characters, and the rest is just like the experience is the important part.
Definitely, and it is a really nice film. Like the cinematography is just spot on with this film.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely well done, and performance wise, like I think it's some of Dafoe's and Pattinson's best work.
Yeah.
Specifically, because one of the things I heard whenever it came to it is Robert Pattinson always had the goal of like, oh, Willem Dafoe, he's very over the top with his acting, like just goes at it. I'm going to outdo him. And what happened is Dafoe got even more over the top than what Pattinson did, and just would constantly just build that up specifically.
Right.
Pattinson said it was insane working with Dafoe as a partner there because he would just go even more over the top than what Pattinson was aiming to do. So I feel like because of that raw, visceral energy, you get so many bizarre, strange moments that I wouldn't trade for the world. Like the one scene where they're going, what? They're just screaming what at each other, or they're just screaming and dancing so hard. I feel like just all those moments there definitely make this film so much of an interesting watch to experience there. But because again, it is kind of just like it's everywhere, kind of like going in all directions. It does make it not quite an easy film, like you mentioned, to watch. Right. So that's why I like hit it right at a 7, which it's pretty impressive that it moved up a couple of point slots. Yeah.
If I were to watch this movie again, one thing I'd focus on, maybe you picked up on something I didn't, but I noticed the goal that specifically bothers Robert Pattinson only had one eye.
The
one-eyed seagull. And I couldn't tell exactly what that was like. It felt like a symbol, but what was it a symbol for? What was it attached to? And I didn't know, and I need to rewatch. Maybe the guy's head he finds in the lobster trap only has one eye too.
It does.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe that's it. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of interesting because this is me just kind of shooting at the dark, because that's something that's like, oh yeah, there is that one-eyed goal. But if you look at a lot of stuff, there always seems to be one eye specifically there, because you have the one-eyed goal, you have Robert Pattinson burying Willem Dafoe where like dirt covers one of his eyes, and then you have the corpse head of the guy that Robert Pattinson had killed that has one eye. Then you have the lighthouse, which is basically like almost an eye, seeing everything, one eye spinning around. And then at the very end, you see that Robert Pattinson's eye is picked out.
Right.
So I can't.
They're all. It's all the same.
Because, like, doesn't the eye represent, like, knowledge or
maybe
something, like, symbolic like that? Just the one eye? So, I don't know, though. But obviously it had to be pretty specific if Robert Eggers like, I need a seagull with one eye.
Right. Well, if it was the same, I guess my initial surface level thought was like, okay, that's the soul of the dead guy or whatever, and so to kill that seagull specifically has even more weight, and that seagull maybe was bugging Robert Pattinson because it was trying to warn him, you know what I mean? It was trying to warn him about Willem Dafoe, or was trying to warn him about the lighthouse, and that's why it sits in front of the lighthouse and like doesn't want him to get in, you know what I mean? Right.
Bro. yeah, that's a good point, because the seagulls keep bothering Robert Pattinson.
Right. And it's like, well, obviously a seagull can't communicate, but what's it trying to say? What's it trying to say when it blocks the lighthouse? Is it trying to say, go home? Is it trying to say, or is it trying to, enact revenge on him? Because the seagull does attack him at one point, but
Yeah, you do have to wonder, like, as soon as he kills a seagull, they were going to make it to the next day, but then they're basically stuck on the island.
Right. And
God
then
knows when.
The storm comes. Is that the result of killing the seagull? Who knows,
Yeah.
Well, actually, probably, because as soon as he kills the seagull, it shows the wind changed or
Yeah,
whatever.
it was too coincidental,
right,
I feel like, to not be connected, which is, again, makes it so hard to figure out what is causing this to occur, whether it's supernatural or just insanity sinking in there. So yeah, I feel like I'm sure we probably could think about more points to touch on. I feel like, again, it's just a film that there's a lot to look at. Do you think you'll be viewing this film in the future or mentioning it to people as much as American Psycho?
I'm already interested in seeing it again. Not anytime soon, just because I wouldn't want to watch any movie like right after just watching it.
No, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like this is one that definitely becomes richer on a second view. You know what I mean? Now that you kind of know what to expect, to go in and look for things that you missed the first time. So
I'll be curious to hear your thoughts if you ever do rewatch it, whether it's with a group of friends or something like that. What your experience was the second time, because I think definitely letting time pass by, because it's been a while. Like, I think Coale and I watched it in October, I think.
Okay.
We watched it around that time specifically. So definitely a lot of time has passed by since then. So time definitely will help marinate the overall thoughts you've had specifically. And
my friend Jordan loves this movie. He brings it up all the time. So I'll have to talk with him.
Yeah, you'll have to get back with me and see what all you discussed there specifically, because there's a lot to mention. But yeah, aside from that, any closing thoughts on Lighthouse or anything?
Boy, I don't think so. I guess the one... This is such a random closing thought. The one thing I forgot to mention that's also similar between Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe's characters is that they're both big old smokers. Big smoky.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's right. With Robert Pattinson's cigarette and Willem Dafoe's pipe.
Yeah, big smoky.
Yeah, so that's another...
That's
another
box.
Coin for 2 and 1 there specifically.
I don't know. Maybe the point is that it's all the same. Maybe it's all just a big swirling imagination of the island. Because if they all have one eye, maybe that's because they're all connected. They're all the same entity.
What if the lighthouse is Robert Pattinson's penis? Because you saw that one scene where the lighthouse was on his side and then flipped vertically.
Oh. And it's just shooting out light, which is like, come.
I'm glad we could bring this full circle.
Yeah, that's
just a full jerk off circle here going on.
That's the true meaning of the movie. It's a big penis.
I that's a perfect note to end that review on. Let's talk about the next movie. So, I tried to think about the next movie specifically. Obviously, there's not a lot more deeper films I could think of than this, which...
This has some depth to it.
Yeah. So this definitely kind of helped narrow down the next film overall. Okay. Just because I'm like, I want something, pull the gas off the what does it mean brakes there, and do something a little more fun. But I'm also curious to see what you think about it. But for this next film, we're going to be heading overseas.
Cross the pond, eh?
Yeah, cross the pond indeed. In fact, you're doing the right dialect.
Really? The correct one? Is it Cockney, is it?
All right, it is.
Hello. Watching Shaun of the Dead or something.
No, but that'd be a good one, wouldn't it?
No.
No. It's dealing more with the supernatural kind of being. You know, the dog.
The dog?
The dog, yes.
That old bitch.
It is indeed.
We're watching a documentary about the Queen. She's a fucking ghoul. The bitch should not be alive. On the throne for 70 years. Who does that?
The Queen.
I know. That was a rhetorical question.
Okay. Mother hints about the film that's not going to lead to the Queen nuking us.
Okay.
The film takes place in the 80s. Okay. 1981, I believe, specifically. And there's a song about it. It goes like, ah, woo. Now, woo.
I don't know. Oh.
Holy crap. I don't know if I'm just giving bad hints or we're just incapable of figuring out what the hell to do. Okay.
80s British film with a woo.
And it's about two college students doing that one trip they do.
Matthew Broderick's car accident in the Irish foothills, killing 2 women that he said. No? Okay. That was horrific.
Holy crap, Aaron.
1989, Matthew Broderick's car accident. He killed 2 women and he got off scot-free because of the power of celebrity. Fuck Matthew Broderick.
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, he killed him in Ireland.
I feel like you're gaslighting me.
No.
Are you Willem Dafoeing me?
I follow a meme page even called called Matthew Broderick's car accident, and it's just memes about Matthew Broderick's car accident. Yeah, see, it's got 40,000 followers. Caused 2 deaths with dangerous driving. Yeah. Warning, Matthew Broderick's car accident in 1987 ended the lives of 2 innocent women. You have been warned. That's what the whole meme page is.
Oh my god.
Did you know that Matthew Broderick's car accident in 1987 ended the lives of 2 innocent women?
Oh my god. Okay.
So it's not about Matthew Broderick's car accident.
No, it's not. But it's about 2 Americans who are going to
Stonehenge.
closer to where the dialect we were speaking is from.
England, London.
Yeah.
London, okay.
Yeah, 2 Americans going to London, and it has a famous supernatural creature. Ow.
I really don't know.
I'm trying my best here, people.
I think I just don't know what this creature is.
No, you're good.
It's a werewolf? The
Yeah.
London werewolf?
American Werewolf in London.
I've never heard of this movie.
You haven't? Oh my gosh, I feel like a dick. Yeah, no, it's an actual 80s film, and then there's like a film, there's an actual song called like Werewolves of London.
I've never heard this song.
Holy. Okay, well, I'm going to send that to you. Thank you guys for listening to this very strange and eclectic episode. We're going to catch you all next time when we're popping the scary with an American werewolf in London. Werewolves of London. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @CoalkirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're popping the scary.